By 1941, Britain had already been at war for over 2 years. Sheffield, Liverpool, Southampton, Bristol, Cardiff, Manchester and Coventry had been bombed heavily, and the nightly German bomber blitz over London was causing enormous casualties. Huddersfield wasn't spared either. But the town's greatest wartime tragedy came not as a result of any bomb or gunfire.
The fire, Booth's factory fire, Booth's clothing manufacturing, John William Street, Huddersfield. It was the 31st of October 1941, and approximately 5 minutes past 8, just as the workforce had arrived, they'd all gone on to the different levels. It was a 5-storey factory. There were dressing departments, there were sewing departments. All of a sudden there was a great panic, and the fire, which started in the lower floor as a result of a pipe being placed inside a raincoat pocket, it wasn't fully extinguished. Unfortunately, the alarm bell didn't sound. It was faulty. They called it a buzzer as opposed to a fire bell. Of course, the worst of all, there was no external fire escape.
I lost my brother. I was 10 and my brother was 16, and I first heard of it when it was half term and I was going over to stay 2 or 3 days with my auntie in Halifax, and the next door neighbour said, don't go into town because they've stopped the bus services, there's been a fire. So he'd led a few girls into the lift to go down in the lift, and then the power of the lift, the power in the building was shut off. So he probably perished with some girls in the lift itself.
As I say, you see, we got down first lot of steps, with most of those that were in floor above, with them all being stone steps, you see, it were all wood. You still got to go for light, you see. Then when we got out, we saw there was some up window down the water. We couldn't watch that, and then fire engine come, so we can't watch that. So I said, we'll have to go home. I said, let us probably know that we're all right, because we had telephones then, you see, like they have now. We couldn't ring up. So we went home. We left because we couldn't stop and watch it, couldn't stop and watch them jumping out the window, up at window, couldn't watch that, it was awful.
I remember going in, hardly anybody there. Mary Cowley, that lives at Kirklees, she's been in the examiner. She was late coming, and I can remember talking to her. She was saying, what's the matter? I said, well, can't you see it's on fire? And, oh, I'm going in, and I think she did go in, but she was all right. We just, like I say, it was like, you can imagine the staircase went like that, and it was all wood. And I don't know. It seemed as though something blew up by the time we got to the doors outside. And warm. Where Jack had told us to go, we were told left everything behind, clothes and scissors and things. And we just went down the steps, and then we were 2 steps to the outside door. We just stood there, didn't know what to do. And after a few minutes, that was when something seemed to, like that, blow up. And we flew across the road. A lot of us went that way towards the Third George. We went that way, under the bridge.
71 years later, almost to the day, a memorial service was held at St. Peter's Parish Church, where the original service had taken place. Survivors of the fire and relatives of survivors filled the church.
Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne, saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away."
Let's remember before God those who died in the Booth fire, 31st of October 1941. Doris Gatenby,
Gladys Gwendolyn Marshall,
Eileen Leadbeater,
Betty Mounsey,
Anne Woodhouse,
Edith Lockwood,
Leonard Morehouse,
John Christopher Hanselman.
Helen Pugh.
Councillor, what's been your involvement in this?
Over 12 months ago, two relatives approached myself to ask if Kirklees Council would get involved working with them for a remembrance of the victims of that fire, and the council's pledged its support for the plaque. We involved Tesco's, and with the relatives of the victims chose a site for the plaque, and been really pleased to see the plaque being unveiled in a few minutes, and also very pleased that there's lots of people here gathered here today in remembrance of those victims, and most of those victims were women as well, so it's important to show that the women, at that time, were playing a very important part in Huddersfield.
Well, I was approached by the leader of the council to be involved, and by Tesco, and of course part of the wall of the old building that burnt is now part of the modern Tesco's. And of course, in my childhood, I was a war baby, and this is very evocative for me. And I was brought to tears by that list of names, nearly all women, mothers, mothers and sisters, and the bulk of them were young women. And of course, a lot of the men were away at war, and of course, many mills were a lot of women working in them. But so tragic. And sometimes these days we complain and whinge about health and safety, but a lot of those people the doors were barred, they couldn't get out. Just so moving that in those days. And this isn't in times, this isn't Victorian times. It was 1941, and the fact that workplace was not properly maintained, and the people working in there in a highly combustible area. And the lady I was just meeting, she said their priest in the Catholic Church went up a ladder and gave absolution to the people inside who couldn't get out and knew they were dying. Now there's nothing more moving than that. But we should remember them, and we should sometimes, when we complain about modern health and safety regulations, that hopefully that couldn't happen today.
Thanks everybody for walking down on a blustery day, which must be something similar to it was those 71 years ago. We're here today to remember a sad day in the history of Huddersfield, when 49 lives were lost. Not at that time due to the war which was raging, but today we are privileged to honour their memory by the unveiling of a plaque.
Frida Smith,
Mabel Meller,
46 of the 49 victims of the fire
Edith
buried in a mass
Whitty.
grave at Edgerton Cemetery.
Kate Richardson,
Lillian Watmore,
Agnes Hoyle,
Marion Kay,
Jean Wilson,
Mabel Simpson,
Horace Binney,
Annie Bentley,
Lizzie Staveley,
Joan Netherwood,
Mildred Beaumont, Margaret Birkhead,
Mary Scaramuzza,
Gladys Butterworth,
Joan Butler,
Annie Taylor,
Walter Beaumont,
Charles Atkinson,
Henry Dransfield,
George Sanderson,
Olive Lakelock,
Jessie Beaumont,
James Woofenden,
Percy Boothroyd,
George M. Hutchinson,